Biblical Financial Stewardship, a biblical guide to faith and finances in the final crisis. This presentation is for biblical education and general stewardship guidance only. It does not constitute individualized financial, legal, or investment advice. Our focus is on stewardship practices you can control: budgeting, saving, giving, caring for family, and preparing for hard times. We do not cover stocks, bonds, or speculative investments. That's a deliberate choice based on biblical conviction. Scripture repeatedly warns against placing our trust in uncertain riches. Our goal is to help you manage God's resources faithfully, cultivate peace, and serve others, regardless of market ups and downs. Everything we teach here is grounded in timeless principles that remain faithful in every economic season. Let's get started. Welcome. This presentation draws from biblical principles and decades of professional experience in financial planning, mortgage services, and insurance. The presenter is a retired financial professional and does not offer individual financial consulting, advisory, or brokerage services. The purpose of this material is education, spiritual encouragement, and practical stewardship guidance rooted in Scripture. For many people, money is a source of stress, confusion, and fear. We're often taught to manage finances using the world's approach: chasing security, comparing ourselves to others, and worrying about what might happen tomorrow. Scripture offers a better way. The Bible teaches stewardship rooted in trust, wisdom, and contentment. In this course, we'll explore biblical principles and practical tools to help you manage what God has entrusted to you, not just for survival, but for faithfulness. This is a 12-part journey designed to move us from financial anxiety to faithful stewardship. Here's the path we'll be walking together in this series. We'll start with the foundations of biblical stewardship, then move into practical areas like budgeting, checking and savings accounts, and understanding debt. From there, we'll explore giving, preparing for the future, honest work, and family finances while addressing different stages of life, from young adults to elders. We'll also talk about living debt-free, preparing for hard times, and alternative economic systems like bartering and gift economies. This is the roadmap for the journey ahead. In Session 1, we lay the foundation for biblical stewardship. Scripture tells us that God owns everything. Psalm 24 verse 1 reminds us that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Nothing we possess is truly ours. It all belongs to Him. Because of that, we are stewards, not owners. In Matthew 25, Jesus teaches that what we are given is entrusted to us for a time, and one day we will give an account of how we managed it. Money, then, has a purpose. Biblically, it exists for provision, for blessing others, and for advancing God's kingdom, not for hoarding, fear, or comparison. And finally, stewardship requires wisdom. Scripture consistently warns against covetousness and unnecessary debt, and it calls us to prepare, not panic when hard times come. As we move forward in this series, we'll explore both the spiritual principles and the practical decisions that help us become faithful stewards of what God has entrusted to us. Before we can understand stewardship, we have to understand ownership. Scripture is clear that God owns everything. Psalm 24 tells us the earth and all that fills it belongs to the Lord. Haggai reminds us that silver and gold are His. And Peter tells us that everything material is temporary and will one day pass away. This changes how we view money. What we possess is not something we truly own. It's something we hold for a season. When we understand God's ownership, it frees us from fear, pride, and comparison. We stop asking, "How much is mine?" and begin asking, "How does God want this used?" Because God owns everything, our role is stewardship. Jesus explains this in the parable of the talents. Each servant was entrusted with something different according to their ability. They were not judged by comparison, but by faithfulness. In Scripture, talents represent more than money. They include skills, abilities, opportunities, and spiritual gifts, everything God places in our care. The faithful servants used what they were given, and it multiplied. The unfaithful servant buried his talent out of fear and lost even what he had. The lesson is clear. God expects what He gives to be used. Faithful stewardship brings blessing and greater responsibility. Neglect leads to loss. Stewardship is not just about money. It's about our whole lives, lived faithfully until the Master returns. Next, let's talk about the purpose of money. God has entrusted us with money for specific purposes. First, provision, to care for our households and meet our daily needs. Scripture is clear that providing responsibly is part of faithful stewardship. Second, blessing others, using what God has given us to help those in need and to support one another, especially in times of hardship. Third, advancing God's kingdom, supporting gospel work, ministry, and efforts that point people to Christ. But the Bible also gives clear warnings. Jesus cautions us to beware of covetousness, and Proverbs reminds us that debt places us in a position of bondage. When money becomes something we chase, fear, or depend on, it begins to master us. James warns that hoarded wealth can become worthless, rusted, and unable to help anyone. Especially in the last days, faithfulness is not measured by how much we store up, but by how wisely and obediently we use what God has entrusted to us. God's design for money is not accumulation, but purpose, provision, generosity, and service. Now we're going to take a closer look at our expenses. Take a moment to look at the chart on the screen. Some expenses are fixed. They stay the same each month, like rent, insurance, or loan payments. Other expenses are variable. They change from month to month, such as groceries, gas, or discretionary spending. I want you to look at the 9 expenses shown here and decide 3 things: which are fixed, which are variable, and which you consider essential. Then, write down your top 3 monthly expenses, the ones that take up the largest portion of your income. As you do this, remember Proverbs 21 verse 5. The thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness. Budgeting is not about reacting. It's about planning ahead and making intentional choices. This kind of diligence allows you to save, give, and steward God's resources wisely. Budgeting isn't about restriction. It's about faithful management so that every dollar serves a purpose and honors God. As we close our first session, let's talk about practical steps to make sure your money fulfills its God-given purpose, providing for your family and blessing others. Bank setup essentials. If you're married, consider joint accounts. This allows both spouses to access and manage finances together, building trust and transparency. Next, think about POD or TOD forms at your bank, payable or transfer on death. These let you name a beneficiary to automatically receive your funds without probate, helping your loved ones avoid extra stress. You'll also want authorized signers and a power of attorney. A trusted family member can pay bills if you're incapacitated, and a power of attorney grants legal authority to manage finances when needed. Finally, digital access is essential. Keep a secure record of logins and passwords for your executor or spouse, and review your paperwork regularly. Encourage your family to talk to the bank about these options so everything stays current. Remember, Scripture says, "It is required in stewards that a man be found faithful." Faithful stewardship isn't just about earning. It's about planning, protecting, and using what God entrusts to us wisely. We look forward to seeing you in our next session, Budgeting and Contentment.